Hi guys, welcome back. I'm going to do another video today. Should be just a quick one. I'm sort of in the house by myself. People are slowly starting to trickle in, so maybe hopefully I'll be able to get this done in time. Somebody was chainsawing outside all day, cutting up firewood, so it was kind of noisy and annoying. So with very few people at home right now, I thought I'd be able to do a quick video. So today I want to discuss a wonderful book, and I should have reviewed this a long time ago, and it is Fifth Business, a Canadian classic. Fifth Business, written by Robertson Davies. So when you think about Canadian classics, think of W.O. Mitchell, you think of Robertson Davies, and a few others. A good Canadian book is golden. You know, I love American literature, and I think the reason is the role that the really strong role or powerful role or prominent role that the land plays, especially in the 1800s. The land plays a powerful role, and it does, of course, in Canadian literature as well. You know, when you think of people like Farley Mowat or whatever, most Canadians who read grew up reading Farley Mowat and his books that are set in the Canadian North. So I want to talk about Robertson Davies' amazing book. And Robertson Davies actually didn't live too far away from here. In fact, he, I believe, at one point in his life, he lived in Renfrew, which is about an hour from here. Okay, so Robertson Davies' classic, Fifth Business, has been a staple of the Canadian curriculum almost since its publication in 1970. It's superb. It is a good story in itself, and it offers a fascinating window into certain aspects of Canadian history, and especially World War I. The second of the 6 parts into which the novel is divided is called I Am Born Again, and it follows the main character, Dunstan Ramsay. That's Robertson Davies' initials reversed. Charles Dickens also did that reversal with David Copperfield. So it follows him when he enlists in the army at 17. He ends up horribly wounded at the Battle of Passchendaele. Passchendaele also has another name, but anyway, that's fine. When he's wounded in the Battle of Passchendaele, he encounters a statue of the Virgin Mary, and it's sort of an important moment in his life, but not quite in the way in which you think. It starts his fascination with the history of it's a scholarly fascination with the history of saints. That's the way it's presented. It's not your classic religious conversion or anything, but it becomes a scholarly preoccupation with him. So the need to give an account of himself forms the sort of the pretext of the book. Seems a little awkward and a little bit artificial, but anyway, the book is presented as a letter he is writing to the headmaster of the school where he teaches. Of course, no real letter to somebody would be this long. We're talking several hundred pages, but that's the pretext of the book. Strange to say, he's a minor character in his own life story. So the main character, Dunstan Ramsay, and that's the meaning of the title, Fifth Business. The term, this is a term for a character in an opera who enables the main characters to complete the drama of their lives. So in a way, he's saying he's a minor character in his own story. The main characters then are Mary Dempster and her son Paul. These characters are introduced almost immediately in the novel. Indeed, Mary is mentioned in the very first sentence of the book. It begins, quote, "My lifelong involvement with Mrs. Dempster began at 5:58 o'clock p.m. on 27th of December, 1908, at which time I was 10 years old, 10 years and 7 months old. But it's not fair to say that the main character is simply an observer, as, for instance, like whatever the narrator of what's it called there, Scott Fitzgerald's book. Anyway, it's a little bit more than that. In fact, it's a lot more than that. So it's true that in Ramsay's hands we get close to an objective, impartial witness as possible. But an impartial witness can't be a character, really, can he, in the book? His own loves and hates we find barely developed at all in the course of the story. He's almost clinically detached from the events even of his own life, at least with respect to those ones that do not pertain to Mary Dempster directly. But what is the nature of this of this story? You know, his borderline obsession or guilt with respect to Mary Dempster. So she's injured in the very first pages of the book. She's injured when the little boy there at the titular character or the main character is roughhousing with another boy, and the other boy throws a snowball and hits Mary Dempster, and she goes into premature labor, and that's the beginning the beginning of one series of catastrophes after another for this Mary Dempster. So, but what's the basis of this obsession? Is it Oedipal, right? There's little evidence to support the interpretation that Ramsay's obsession with Mrs. Dempster is sexual in nature. Ultimately, his interest in her is a part of his interest in religion as a whole, as he wonders himself whether this strange woman, Mary Dempster, is herself a saint. His professional interest in saints requires that he explain himself here and there, because he's not Catholic, he's Protestant, and so is the world he inhabits. I mean, we're thinking of turn of the century Ontario, very strongly Protestant. So these defenses are as much attempts at self-understanding as anything else. One never gets the impression that he's on a spiritual journey in the classic sense, nor even in the sense of like the other great Canadian work, Who Has Seen the Wind by W.O. Mitchell. It's very different. Is this a failure of writing, that we don't see the spiritual development of the main character? I tend to say no. I say that this is a reflection of the author, and the author himself, he never had a spiritual conversion in that sense. That's not how he went through life. So in this sense, it's authentic to the author, okay? That it's, I mean, there's more going on in the psychology of the author that perhaps he's aware of himself, but it's not something that we can put in a classical conversion story of someone like you'd find in a Tolstoy character like Pierre or Levin or somebody. So it's very different in that way. It's more cerebral. So more insight is gained into this main character through contrast with his lifelong friend. Friend is sort of a stretch, and that's kind of funny as well. It's like your lifelong friend, you don't really have much affection for him. What kind of person doesn't have deep affection for their lifelong friend? What kind of person doesn't feel things for the saints or whatever, when that's the focus of his lifelong study? So this is Robertson Davies, right? This is his personality coming across, and it seems odd to me in that case. I mean, I respect it, but it's not my experience. It's not how I go through life. Okay, so what kind of journey is this? What are we meant to learn from this journey, from this book? Okay, let me refer back to Boyce. So his closest friend is called Boy Staunton, and this is the boy. This boy is the one who hits Mary Dempster with the snowball. Okay, and they respond to it. They react to it extremely differently. It seems not to affect Boy Staunton at all, right? You know, the main character who's Robertson Davies' alter ego, Ramsey, you know, eats him up over his life, and he becomes very much concerned and interested in Mary Dempster, whereas Boy Staunton doesn't care. Never seems to crop up again in his imagination. So, one of the questions might seem appropriate to ask. Usually we want to know what an author is trying to say. However, sometimes an author is not trying to say anything at all. He simply wishes to share an experience. I think that's true of the Iliad, for instance. That work has no message in the modern sense of the word. It's an account of the deeds and characteristics of heroes. Okay? What is the point of Plato's dialogues? Okay? They have no point. They are mental exercises. What's the point of fifth business then? The frustration one feels in attempting to answer this question, can it mean anything other than that life, according to Robertson Davies, has no meaning at all? Okay? And yet, the compelling nature of the story, the interest with which one follows its development, where does this come from? Where does the interest of the story come from? Why is it so interesting? If the main character is no character at all, how can his story interest us? He tells Mary's and Paul's stories. He tells Boy's story, and he tells his wife, Boy's wife's Leola's story. But all of their lives seem to be as equally devoid of lessons for the reader. They are not devoid of interest, they're devoid of lessons. There is nothing more interesting than the pitiable Dostoevskian tale of Mary, okay, and her husband Amasa and their son Paul. In this case, I call them Dostoevskian because they remind us of some of the most pathetic characters in Dostoevsky's books. And not only do I call them Dostoevskian because they remind me of those pathetic characters, but because they're well done too. They deserve that title of Dostoevskian. So, who would enjoy this book? It's a realistic story. There's nothing impossible in it. There's not even anything unlikely in it. Much of it was based on the author's own life, and the character of Boy Staunton, who's not an admirable character in any stretch of the imagination, was, for instance, based upon Vincent Massey, who was one of the governors general of Canada, and who was the author's friend, which is interesting, isn't it? Like that he did base it on his own friend. Most Canadians probably have heard of Vincent Massey. There's a lot in this book that defies easy interpretation. The main character's relationship with his parents is obviously dysfunctional, but it's never sufficiently explored. The evils of small town life are brushed up against, but they're not explored very far. Not enough to slow down the plot. Most of all, this is a book about religion, but for as overt as that theme is, not a whole lot is advanced. Not a whole lot isn't said that this is religion or Christianity is bad or Christianity is good. So Ramsey tells us that he is trying to build on the great sociologist of religions, William James' insights into religion, as recorded in his famous Varieties of Religious Experience. But has he contributed anything to it? Has anything at all been established? The work doesn't praise religion, nor does it criticize religion. Now, again, I highly recommend this book. It's wonderful. I say that as a Canadian and someone who's interested in history, but it is a wonderful and extremely well-written book. It is apparently a part of a series I think it's a trilogy, if I'm not mistaken. The other two books in the series aren't as well known, aren't as celebrated. I'll definitely read them at some point in time. But Fifth Business is an amazing book. I would give it a 7. Okay, 7 amongst the classics, which is good. That's high praise. I like Who Has Seen the Wind, W.O. Mitchell's book, better. I give W.O. Mitchell's book an 8. Who Has Seen the Wind an 8, and I'll probably do a review of it soon enough. And again, I highly recommend Fifth Business. I came across it because it was assigned to my daughter, who was in grade, I don't know, 11 at the time, I think. I think my older brother was assigned this book too when he was in high school, but I never was. And so I grabbed my daughter's copy and read it, and just absolutely loved it. So Fifth Business, Robertson Davies, Ontario writer, good on ya. And hopefully I'll be able to bring you some more Canadian classics soon, especially Who Has Seen the Wind. Thanks guys very much.